Thanks for joining episode 3 of our US 2024 Regulatory Roundup. In this episode, I'm going to be discussing some of the technology solutions that firms and institutions can use to ensure that they're able to comply with all of these new requirements that we've seen in 2024 and that I've discussed in the previous 2 episodes in this series. So just to start off, I think one of the main lessons learned really for institutions going into this is it's really about the right mix of technology. It's not necessarily going to be any one technology solution that's going to help you, clear all these hurdles and achieve all these regulatory requirements, but it's really going to be the right mix of technology. And the combination of core solutions with AI augmentation, in particular, AI-driven augmentation for the different parts of your programs. I think there's also some other key considerations for firms, things like, is it an enterprise-wide solution or is it augmentation to a core solution like transaction monitoring, for instance? You're looking for a core transaction monitoring system that can generate those alerts for you, or are you really looking for augmentation to help with the management of false positives from those systems, or perhaps both, right? It's really about that mix. Another key consideration is, will this solution be on-premise or will it be software as a service? I think what we see in these rules is that they're covering large swaths of entities and firms, right? And, RIAs is a very big sector. Non-bank financial institutions like payment processors and fintechs, also a very large sector, but it can be very different from registered investment advisors. So, there will be the demands for how a system is implemented, whether it be on-premise or software as a solution, or a software as a service, is going to be something that firms and entities will need to consider. Also, data concerns. Of course, some of these rules are entirely new requirements. For instance, the RIA rule requiring AML compliance and AML programs for registered investment advisors. In a lot of ways, it's an entirely new area for a lot of these different entities. Some may have had optional programs, but for many, this is an entirely new effort. So they will need to consider, what their data sort of looks like. Do they have the right mix of data? Is it in a form that can be used, for these different technology solutions? And will there be any work there? Is there any additional data that they might need to start collecting that they weren't collecting before? Certainly with regard to this proposed CIP rule for investment advisors, that's going to be a key area where they may not have been collecting that data before, and now they're going to be required to collect it, or at least when the rule is finalized. So they'll have to consider whether or not they even have that data and what they'll need to do to get it in order to be able to access that data for other different types of technology solutions for an AML program. And then lastly, and in some ways most importantly, governance and risk management. We're seeing this more and more as a very, very critical consideration, especially as AI takes more hold in financial crime programs, lots of different uses for AI, lots of different types of AI. So this is going to be a critical concern around governance, not only of these new program efforts, like a customer identification program or identifying beneficial ownership in the case of those custodial accounts for non-bank financial institutions and non-bank companies. You'll obviously need governance and risk management around that, but there's clearly going to need to be governance and risk management around, the different technology solutions that you're looking to bring on. As we all know, there's certainly lots of benefits to those solutions, but governance and risk management is also a key consideration when bringing those solutions into your program. So let's take a look at what some of those interesting and innovative solutions are. First of all, entity resolution and networks. I think this is a very, very attractive solution, particularly when we consider the types of entities that these rules are going to be applied to and the types of business that they engage in, right? So for instance, registered investment advisors, in that space, there may not be a very high volume of transactions. But what might be more important for those types of entities to investigate and look at is the flow of those transactions, the originators, the beneficiaries, and everybody in between, right? And be able to make those connections between those entities, those individuals, the transactions, certain customer identifying characteristics like addresses and phone numbers and things like that. entity resolution is certainly a capability that can help you get there. And the network visualization, going on to looking at our next slide, this is something that's going to help you not only make those connections, but then be able to visualize those connections, spotting subjects that share key attributes, identifying UBOs. Again, that goes back to the FDIC rule for non-bank companies. That's going to be important for them in identifying beneficial ownership, transactional flow of funds, and then, being able to dig down into these links to get additional information that the system is able to collate for you all in one place. Networks and entity resolution is incredibly, incredibly good for those purposes. And then if we move on and we look at the risk assessment or the customer risk rating, this is a critical piece of this work that's going to be done. In particular, again, going back to the fact that these rules cover a large variety of different firms, and those customer bases might look very, very different across those different kinds of firms, right? So you're going to need a product that's going to be very flexible, easily calibrated, and easily customizable for the types of customers that you have and the different factors that are most applicable to you, within that customer risk rating. Also, having a system that's going to be able to show you all of this risk in one place, right? So a single view of risk and a single active alert. That's certainly going to be critical for the holistic understanding of your customer risk. Moving on in terms of AML detection and transaction monitoring, certainly firms, especially, in the context of RAs and ERAs, transaction monitoring and SAR reporting will be, mostly new to them. And so you're going to want to look into, traditional transaction monitoring systems that, use those rules-based detections to try to isolate that illicit activity or that suspicious activity that meets the reportable threshold. But there's a lot going on in AI now to enable you to augment your different systems to be able to find even more activity that you otherwise might not be easily able to spot, and those rules might not actually be able to detect. So, looking at AI-driven augmentation for monitoring, you're looking at leveraging rules like, models looking at risk similarity, models looking at change in behavior, models looking at hotspots of different behavior, isolating that and being able to deliver that to you in a detection. And then also anomaly detection. This is another big one. Of course, the anomalies are always going to help you sort of isolate where that suspicious activity might be taking place and point you in the right direction. And this is what these models are really developed to do, right? Find that unknown risk, find that latent risk that you otherwise might not be aware of, and then of course is reportable and does meet that SAR threshold. Moving on into the generative AI world, and generative AI is sort of extremely changing investigations and the way they're done, how quickly they can be done, how effectively they can be done. So a generative AI assistant essentially leverages large language models in several ways that I think are very effective for investigations. One of them is, I think the most important one and what we most often get inquiries on from our customers is around SAR narrative drafting. So of course that can be a very time-intensive process within the investigation process, drafting those SARs, writing those SARs, and of course as FinCEN looks at this effectiveness with more specificity within the AML, strengthening and modernizing AML rule, they'll certainly be looking for those SARs to be more effective. So this generative AI component can essentially use those large language models and the AI systems to build these narratives automatically for you. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you do not want to have a human in the loop to review all that information. You certainly do, but it makes that process much faster, much more effective, much more consistent across the different SARs that you have and that are being done by different investigators. This will make those SARs and those SAR narratives much more consistent. The other thing generative AI is great at for investigations is developing investigation summaries, right? So of course, record keeping is a big component of investigations and that process. And so keeping those records and keeping those investigation summaries will be important too. And, just like generative AI is able to generate those SAR narratives, it's also able to generate those investigation summaries very, very quickly, because ultimately what it's able to do is collate information and synthesize it and analyze it very, very quickly at the click of a button. And then lastly, most people at this point have heard about these AI-driven co-pilots. So what that is essentially like a chat box within your system where you can query the tool and get information and responses and answers back extremely quickly and in a very consolidated way. So rather than investigators going out to 5 or 10 different sources for different information and having to collate it themselves and analyze it themselves, they're able to plug into a question into a co-pilot and essentially get an answer, and a lot of times, a very extensive answer, very comprehensive answer, very, very quickly. So these generative AI co-pilot tools are becoming, very critical in the investigation process, especially for efficiency, but also for effectiveness. The only caveat to this, and we hear this from a lot of customers, is that while again there's benefits to AI, there's also concerns and considerations around governance, transparency, explainability, and those sorts of things. So again, while AI delivers a lot of different benefits for you, you do want to make sure that you're aware of the risks and that you go about managing those risks properly. And as long as you do that, there's so much benefit to these different tools, and the efficiency gains are so incredible to your teams that, going back to FinCEN's rule for strengthening and modernizing, a key part of that is being able to reallocate those resources. So, by using these AI-driven augmentation platforms, they can really enable you to drive out the noise, get your answers quickly, build your investigations and your SAR narratives quickly, and essentially enable those resources to have that free time that you can reallocate them to more effective or more risk-driven processes within your program. And that's certainly the direction that the FinCEN proposed rule around AML programs is going, really that reallocation of resources to the most effective and risk-based processes within your program. So really, it's about the right mix of technology. It's really going to be about ensuring that you're looking for the technology that's right for your program, right for the requirements that all these new rules introduce to your firm, and then enabling your firm to put that right mix of technology together and manage the risk of bringing those technologies on through your governance process. So with that, thank you so much for joining our 2024 Regulatory Roundup Series. If you'd like more information about Symphony AI products, you can always go to our website, ask for information or a demo, and we're really excited and really happy to talk to you about that. Thanks again.